there are some common responses by opponents who know that you are angling for this position. So let's look at those. One of the most common responses is that my opponent may choose to run this way to avoid the shallow lasso. Boom, here like this. Now we can freeze there. At this point, once he's coming around the corner, you can see his hip is almost to my 3 o'clock. What I'll do is eject my leg and go to a more traditional Oma Plata position. Here, coming flat on my back. Now, once I've established this, all I need to do is move my knee back down to the mat. And while I do that, I like to make sure that he doesn't go anywhere. So I'll find something like I would with a standard Oma Plata and just make sure he's not able to roll, escape my hips, and bring my knee to the mat. You can see that immediately he drops to the mat, his shoulder's under a lot of pressure again, and I come right back up into this back take. So, in a way, he makes it easy for me. Let's do that one more time. We're here. I've got the shallow lasso, and to avoid the lasso, he's going to come around to this side. Good. And I move straight to this Oma Plata. You can see his wrist is in the correct position. I'll grab his hip and bring my knee back to the floor. All right? From here, it's quite easy to just sit up and take his back. Yeah? Good. A second way that they try to avoid this sweep in the back take is simply to jump straight to side control. Unfortunately, it's just as easy to get the back take from there. So, this is an extraordinarily common position for me to be in, where what I'll do is I'll just relax my low leg to bait them into coming to side control. This looks like an open opportunity for them to run towards my head and grab what they can, yeah, exactly, and come to side control. But as you saw earlier, I will have found his low knee with my hand, or his trailing knee way back here with my hand. By driving my shin to the mat, his knees will come forward. And I'm going to draw his legs across my face this direction. You can see again, I'm on his back. Okay, let's do that one more time. Here we are, shallow lasso. And he comes to side control. Here we are. Now by moving my knee to the mat, his legs become unweighted, and I'm just going to escort them across my face, like this. And come up, again, for the back. Here. Boom. That happens all the time. And that's easy to set up, just by feigning weakness. It's a really, really deceptive way of getting to this position. But truth be told, you can get into this position any way that you like to set up Oma Plata. Let's look at one way that I like to set up Oma Plata, and I'll just demonstrate that it's quite easy to get to this. If you'll be on your back here for a moment, Irvin, feet facing the camera. Good. I'm in what I like to call a shoulder sit position. I've got quite a lot of weight on my opponent's shoulder. I can increase that weight by coming out to this, what I would call like a surfer's stance, moving all my weight onto my opponent's shoulder. There's an Oma Plata here that we call bobble Oma Plata, and it's really easy to hit, and you'll see that we can go right into this leg hammerlock, back take, what have you, from there. So I'll just move my hips across Irvin's center line and begin to sink them to the floor. Now at this point you can see all I need to do is drag my knee to the mat. And here we are again. I've got a great bind on his shoulder. I've got an uncontested strangle hand, and I've got the ability to manipulate and mangle him as I see fit with this support hand. Okay, so this happens anytime I can find an Oma Plata. I think one of the last things to talk about are some of the more effective ways of shutting this down, and some of the foolhardy ways that people shut this down. You'll discover this as soon as you start playing with it yourself. But let's just talk about it real briefly then. When I get this shallow Oma Plata, it's not uncommon for the person to begin to back up and try to make distance behind or between us. Now this is actually throwing me into the position. As you can see, it's quite easy for me just to spin under here. Now it may be that his arm and his elbow are getting slightly out of position, but it's easy to adjust. And I'm going to come up and take the shallow Oma Plata here, bringing his shoulder back down to the mat and coming up onto his back once again. That one's pretty intuitive, but you do need to be able to support your weight almost entirely on your shoulder and your ear as your hips eject. Finally, people may sacrifice the top position to avoid this back take, and for good reason. But that looks a little more like this. When Irvin just lays down on the mat, your back to the mat, here, it's easy just to ride it up. But normally they'll put their back here as they're pulling away. Let's try that a little bit. Here, go ahead. I can just ride it up this way. And you can see I've still got it. And in fact, we're in the shoulder sit position almost. I've got the shallow Oma Plata here still. And there's any number of ways. In fact, if I'm here or here, sometimes instead of just moving his hips, I'll roll through myself here to this back take. And that's a little flashier. It feels a little bit more like a twister roll, but it's quite effective, especially if your opponent is trying to stiff leg and not let his legs come up and over his face. They can be, just flex out and be somewhat like a board. And in that case, this is a relevant way to get here. So another way that people defend against this is by just sprawling down here. And this actually is a very effective defense against this specific attack. However, it leaves their opposite arm quite available for attack. What I'll do is I'll just come over here and take an underhook on his opposite arm like this, releasing his wrist. I'll eject my leg and come over the top, and you'll see that he's in quite a lot of danger, not only for the Udigarami, which is here, but all my triangle attacks there as well. So we're leaving, it's out of the frying pan into the fire, so to speak. So those are some really common ways for people to defend, and those are 95% of the ways that people do defend these positions. Now I'll say that there are also a bunch of other really fun attacks in here. There's one attack that I like. It's a triangle that we've affectionately been calling the crocodile does bite, and you'll see why. From here, if I want to, I can switch my grips here, and then take what was my wrist control grip and find his far wrist. Now the bicep foot turns heel out and frames as I come through here. You can see I have both of the sleeves still. Now this is the part where the crocodile does bite. My hips eject and grab my opponent, right? And we have a lot of great options here, not least of which is coming up into a mounted triangle. Again, out of the frying pan into the fire. This is not a good day's end for Irvin. So, a lot of options there. But again, these are some of the most successful techniques that I've explored as a brown belt. They're absolutely a part of my A game. They are predicated on being in a gi simply because that wrist grip in do-gi is so much less reliable. But really, anytime you can get an Oma Plata, you can transition into the shallow Oma Plata, which happens all the time in no-gi. And once you're in the shallow Oma Plata, the bind is significant enough to control your opponent's back and does give you that uncontested strangle hand that yields excellent chokes all day. So, thanks for watching, and I hope you guys enjoy this technique. Let me know if you have any questions or if there's something that I haven't covered. Feel free to do so in the comments. And yeah, Thanks for watching.